Showed their contempt for gravity with a heart-stopping performance by Yevgeny Frolov and his ultra-maneuverable Su-37. But the highlight of this year's Farnborough Air Show wasn't a billion-dollar stealth bomber or an aerobatic jet fighter. The center of attention this year comes from the unglamorous world of general aviation. But this rather ordinary-looking helicopter had just accomplished an extraordinary goal, flying around the world in just 17 days. The twin-engine Bell 430 was flown by two Texans, John Williams and Ron Bauer. When the two arrived at Farnborough, they were greeted by others who had flown around the world.
So I think that's a real key point.
To celebrate the latest record-breaking flight, this elite group of globe-trotting alumni has come together for the first time.
Well, guys, this represents the first ever reunion of the around-the-world helicopter pilots. And this is Dick Smith from Australia, who flew solo in a Jet Ranger starting in 1982. Ross Perot Jr. and Jay Coburn, who set the first record of around-the-world flight in 1982, ending in September. And then my great co-pilot, John Williams. We are the five Texans, counting an Australian import with Dick Smith, that have flown around the world in helicopters.
Dick Smith, the group's only non-American, was the motivating force behind Ron Bauer's first solo trip around the world back in 1994. Dick Smith flew into history over a decade earlier. His solo journey around the world was the first ever attempted, and although he wasn't the first to complete the journey, he paved the way for others to follow. Long before Ron Bauer thought about making a helicopter journey around the world, he visited Australia on business. While he was in the neighborhood, Ron dropped in on Dick Smith. It was a visit that would change his life.
I'm really thrilled. He invited me to his home. I went over and met him, and he started telling me the stories of his trip, which he started in 1982. And it had never entered my mind before to go around the world. I had never, ever, that wasn't a life dream, I'd never conceived it. So I immediately began working on a plan in my mind, and finally my wife caught me in my study with an atlas open and little stickies on, and she said, I knew as soon as Dick Smith opened his mouth that you were going. So he's the guy that I have my hat off to for blazing a trail, and he flew solo, I flew solo in 1994.
When Dick Smith flew his helicopter around the world, he was in no hurry. In total, the journey would last about a year. The Australians have a strong tradition of traveling alone and seeing the world. Dick Smith was no exception. Only his walkabout was carried out from the cockpit of a Bell Jet Ranger. But when news of the journey reached the other side of the world, there were some Americans who didn't want to see an Australian become the first to circle the globe in a helicopter. One of them was Ross Perot Jr.
First trip around the world was in 1982. And the reason we flew a helicopter around the world is because Dick Smith started to fly a helicopter around the world, and we decided we'd go beat him. Yeah. Have you heard that? Have you already said that? Okay.
No, I haven't. No, I was.
And so the Texans, I mean, you know, the Texans, we figured we need to go beat this Australian. So we put together a team, and we had a very aggressive program, and Dick's was a different type of trip. And so we did the trip in 30 days. And then that record stood for a long time until finally Ron Bauer came along. And I don't know if it's good sense or crazy, but he decided to go out and beat our record.
The first helicopter flights around the world were all carried out in the single turbine-engine Bell Jet Ranger. This latest trip around the globe was flown in the larger twin-turbine Bell 430. The 430's cockpit was stuffed with the latest and greatest avionics equipment. Joining Ron Bauer for the latest trip around the world is another native Texan, John Williams. Like Ron Bauer, Williams learned to fly a helicopter the hard way, over the jungles of Vietnam. During the early 70s, John was assigned to the 11th Combat Assault Group, flying UH-1H Hueys out of Da Nang. Between 1978 and 1995, John was involved with the World Helicopter Championships and the Helicopter Club of America. For almost 5 years, John flew with the American Precision Helicopter Team, and in 1981, the team won the Helicopter Championships in Poland. In 1989, John was given a lifetime appointment as an international judge for aerospace records and sporting events by the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale in Paris. Little did he know, but just 7 years later, he would attempt a record of his own. By 1996, John had accumulated over 8,400 flight hours. The round-the-world trip on which he was about to embark was sure to add quite a few more.
We, of course, had a very, very aggressive flight plan. I mean, you talk about going around the world in 16 or 17 days, and the world record at that point is 24 days and was being pushed at that point. You must have a great deal of confidence that you can get that job done.
But this time the job would be even harder. All previous round-the-world helicopter journeys were flown from west to east. Ron Bauer and John Williams wanted to circle the globe against the prevailing winds, chasing the sun from east to west. But the two men did have the help of a few tools not available to their predecessors. Most notable is the orbiting network of global positioning satellites, or GPS. Using GPS, the two Texans can track their progress around the world with pinpoint accuracy. If they get tired, they can even let the satellites do the driving. The record attempt began in Farnborough, England on August 17th. If all went as planned, it would end where it began just 17 days later, during the Farnborough Air Show. Along the way, Ron and John would carry out biomedical research for NASA. Cockpit instruments measured the effects of long-endurance flight on the human body. By midday, the two Texans were heading north over England. After stopping at Newcastle and then on the northern fringes of Scotland, the crew headed towards Iceland. The first leg of the journey was also one of the toughest. It involved the longest stretches of flight time over water, cold water. The entire flight could be followed on the internet. Two websites devoted to the journey posted updated tracking information and messages from the flight crew as they set their course over the frigid North Atlantic. During the first day, each message ended, "Glad you are there. Regards, Ron Bauer and John Williams." For aviators, the weather around the British Isles can turn from friend to foe in the blink of an eye. Ron Bauer and John Williams were no exception. After departing under clear skies, the two men ran into fog and were forced to divert from their second refueling spot. After leaving Reykjavik, Iceland, they began a non-stop 400-mile stretch over the Arctic waters of the far North Atlantic. Day 2 involved more over-water travel. After making 2 stops in Greenland, the crew began the long journey towards North America. The stretch from the Greenland coast to Iqaluit, Canada, was almost 450 nautical miles over icy waters. With nowhere to make an emergency landing, the two men simply had to put their faith in machine.
We, of course, have long endurance legs when you go around the world. You're flying 14, 15, 16 hours a day. Our longest day on day 2 was 17 and a half hours.
By day 4, Ron and John were flying over familiar territory. In fact, they would be over familiar territory for the next 5 days, zigzagging the American heartland. The reason for the convoluted flight path was to accumulate enough miles to make the record official. Because around-the-world records are measured by the diameter of the Earth about the equator, Ron and John had to make up the miles according to the fuel limitations of the helicopter. Averaging almost 300 nautical miles between stops, the two men toured America. And from Tallahassee to Seattle, they chipped away at the 20,000 miles it takes to circle the globe. Along the way, Ron and John stopped in at their home state of Texas. It was the end of a long day that had begun way up in Fargo, North Dakota. At the Bell Textron plant in Fort Worth, Texas, the two men were reunited with their wives and children. It had been several weeks since they had left home to begin the journey in England. But for two men who were averaging less than 5 hours of sleep per day, it seemed like much longer.
Hey, glad to be there.
The crew left the Fort Worth plant on day 7, just one day before the planned halfway point. They had traveled over 8,500 nautical miles, with just over 1,200 to go. As Ron and John headed north, they left some of the challenges behind them, but others were yet to come. The crew broke through the midpoint of their journey over the Rocky Mountains. After taking a crooked path across America's west, Ron and John headed northwest along the coast of British Columbia. Again, the two pilots were faced with the challenges posed by the north, Arctic waters, and fickle weather. By the time the crew reached Alaska, they had traveled through 11 time zones. For two tired pilots, just keeping track of the time was an interesting task.
I found in 1994 one of the biggest problems I had was knowing what time it was. When you cross 24 time zones, you're dealing with local time, Greenwich time, your record time, and anytime I wanted to communicate back to Texas or communicate to my wife, I need to know what time it was in Texas. So we had Texas time, record time, Greenwich time, and then we had the local time, and this was the only one we ever changed.
Day 11 began in Nome, Alaska. The next stop was Russia, only 200 miles, but a world away. It would be the shortest flight of the journey, yet it would be the longest day. Because they crossed the international date line, day 11 and 12 fell within the same day. For Ron and John, that day seemed even longer, thanks to the journey's first experience with Russian bureaucracy. When they went to file their flight plan for the first hop over Russian soil, air traffic officials informed them that because visibility at their destination was less than 3 miles, they would have to fly by instruments. But instrument flight rules meant climbing into the clouds, which posed the threat of ice buildup. Ron asked to be exempted because he was flying a helicopter, but air traffic refused. The two men spent the rest of day 12 where they began it, at the airfield in Provodonia, Russia. It was not the first misunderstanding Ron encountered with Russian air traffic control, and it would not be the last.
Russia doesn't really understand what general aviation is. And so for a helicopter across Russia, obviously it's a nightmare in bureaucracy. And they're just not geared up. Wonderful, friendly people. But really they're sort of back in the 1930s. I used to think Australia was bad with air traffic control. Well, I found a country worse, and that's Russia.
Yeah, well, and it's just, we just don't fit in their system. They have no general aviation, and so they don't know how to. They treat us as though we're a large airplane, and of course the helicopter's quite a different animal.
But it has changed, because when you consider 15 years ago when I did my flight, I couldn't even land in Russia, not one landing, and now Ron has done 2 flights right through Russia. Yeah. And Ron's trip is the tradition of Wiley Post, which was right through Siberia. Yeah. So now in 50 years we've come right back and we're going through Russia again.
Spanning several time zones, the vast Siberian landmass is almost as lonely as the open sea. And like flying over the sea, the distance between suitable airfields meant that Ron and John flew several marathon 400-mile stretches between refueling stops.
During the entire flight, I had position reports that were going out automatically every 10 minutes, and it literally tracked us around the world. It was comforting, I must say, going across Siberia, where sometimes the forests were the size of England. You could fly for an hour and not see any sign of civilization. It was very comforting to know that someone knew exactly where I was.
After 5 days of plowing through bad weather and red tape, Ron and John left Russia behind. At the end of day 17, the two arrived in Stockholm. The next day, they set their course to Farnborough and the air show. After brief stops in Denmark and Belgium, the sprint to the finish line came easily. The world was conquered in just 17 days, a new world speed record for a helicopter.
Oh, yeah, it'll be on.
For the second time, Ron Bauer had bested a world record for a helicopter. The record flights of the early 80s have fallen to time and technology, but the world of helicopter enthusiasts is a small one, and grudges are short-lived. Previous record holders like Ross Perot Jr. and Dick Smith arrived at the air show to offer their congratulations to Ron Bauer and John Williams. But at this first reunion for globe-trotting helicopter pilots, it was Ron Bauer who was offering the congratulations.
What a thrill it is for John and me to be here with the Trailblazers. These were the guys that our hats are off to, who did it the hard way, before there was satellite navigation, before Russia was open, and we're just delighted and privileged to have them aboard for this first ever reunion.
Glad to be here.
I tell you, what a thrill.
It's fantastic.
Thank you.
At an air show dominated by the latest and greatest military and civilian aircraft, the presence of 5 globe-trotting helicopter pilots brought a welcome spotlight onto the world of general aviation. Even if just for a moment, the aerospace community looked once again into the faces of men who dared to turn a dream into an experience of a lifetime. In 1997, another helicopter pilot decided to fly around the world. If successful, it would be the first such flight in a single piston engine helicopter, the Robinson R-44. But more notably, it will be the first round-the-world helicopter journey flown by a woman. In fact, pilot Jennifer Murray is not just a helicopter pilot, she's a grandmother. The 56-year-old learned to fly because her husband, a wealthy business executive, was too busy to use the helicopter. The minute Jennifer stepped into the cockpit, she caught the flying bug. Her co-pilot, Quentin Smith, is the world freestyle helicopter champion. For Jennifer Murray and Quentin Smith, the flight around the world wasn't about breaking records. They were hoping to raise 500,000 pounds sterling for the charity Save the Children. Because the goal was to raise money and awareness for children's rights, Jennifer and her co-pilot weren't in a hurry. Their trip was planned to take 97 days, passing over 28 countries. In total, they planned to have 76 refueling stops. Jennifer and Quentin arrived in Hong Kong on schedule. Their arrival was planned to coincide with the official British handover to China.
Take your time, relax. That's for North Pass.
After taking part in a fly past, Jennifer was greeted by well-wishers, which on this stop included her husband. After 3 months traversing the globe, Jennifer and Quentin arrived back in England. On the ground, a welcoming party was already gathered. Among them was the Duchess of York, a charity supporter and fellow helicopter pilot. Despite the royal presence, all eyes were on the globe-trotting English grandmother.
Right, all over here, please. It's a lovely picture.
I feel brilliant. I feel really good. It's okay. It's fabulous to be the first, but the challenge of going around the world in this little helicopter, that was the top thing for us. It's been incredible.
Then came a royal thank you from one helicopter pilot to another.
She's just amazing, and I'm just completely humbled and lost for words at being here today. I just think she and Q have done a fantastic job. Not only, in achieving such a huge achievement, but also for lots of people out there who can say, wow, she did it, That's great. We all need that sort of thing.
Whether pushing the limits of man and machine or raising money for charity, the world remains a tempting challenge. For whatever reason, its untamed skies beckon us, daring us to rise up and conquer its endless horizon. We have circled the globe in everything from bombers to balloons, but for the helicopter pilot, to see the world up close, the cities, forests, the deserts and coastlines, humanity and nature passing beneath, the world is a sight to behold.